What's up, y'all? KRCPinto here, back at it with Axeice. Today we're going to be talking to you about Reflex and the many ways you can use them to your advantage. Most people know that reflecting is a good get-off-me tool in Dragon Ball FighterZ, but Axeice, there are a lot of other perks to using Reflex too, right?
Yes. One thing about reflecting, it helps you understand the situation around you a lot more. And like what Kanto was saying, it has a lot of benefits behind it.
Cool. All right, let's talk about when to reflect first and foremost. First, can we just show just a simple reflect real quick, just so people know what we're talking about?
The universal reflect is back and S or back and the key blast button. There's only one character in the game who doesn't have it. Her name is Videl, but that's another story.
I forgot.
If you are able to block a new string, for example, if you're not doing nothing and you could block it, you could reflect it. Reflecting is a one frame activation move, and it will be anything besides grabs in the game.
When you use reflect in a block string, it can get stuffed though if you try to do it like in a small gap, right?
When you do it in a stagger, meaning your strings isn't true, so I will show you a true string and a stagger string. So this is a true string and he's mashing reflect, but I could delay the combo, and that means the combo is not a string, and so they could reflect. But if they are mashing back and the X button or the key button, that means they are not holding down, so that means they could get punished with their low. So that's why it's not always good to be mashing on that.
Right. So you should use it strategically, not just pound on back in special all the time.
Yes, also for characters who got key blast, they could bait with the key blast and then blow you up, and they could really kill you. So for example, you could set the computer to deflect key blast as soon as they get it, and they reflect too early, so the next move you could easily punish with a big damage. So that you have to keep that in mind.
Let's talk about untrue strings and when you can safely reflect. So you mentioned staggers. Are there any other ways someone can approach you to keep an eye out for where you could sneak a reflect in?
In this game, a lot of the strings, when you vanish, which a lot of people do for, to keep them safe or because they panicked, most of the times is not true and they could reflect it. For example, if I lariat with Bardock or elbow or even Jiren shoulder charge, this is not true and they reflect it. And many reasons why this is good for the defender is, one, it pushes them away. So now if you reflect the vanish, you don't have to worry about them keeping their turn. Also, if you also reflect and they're in the corner, you get a full free punish too, which is very good, and you will punish them for that. And now I'll give you a quick example on that right now. So you set the computer.
Sorry, is that because you recover from reflecting before they recover from using their move?
Yes. So, and now you could punish them, and you could even do better. You could start with a medium, which does more damage, and now you could just blow them up, depending on the frames on certain characters,
Mm-hmm.
See, Jiren is too slow, but if I have Goku Black, you see how I could punish that, and now they take in full scaling damage.
And worse,
so if you know
you've got him in a block string in the corner, which is always a good position to be in.
Oh, and yes, that is a very great thing too. But every character who reflects in a corner could always punish with a light, so don't forget about that.
Good to know. Okay.
Actually, Jiren. See, Jiren could do it with his 2L, and that's big damage.
Good to know.
Anyway.
And so would you suggest, like, for anyone who is worried about getting reflected, would you say what you're doing right now is the best way to test your strings? Just set the comm to reflect and test your strings against them and see what happens?
Yeah, training mode has a lot of ways to set things up, or the NPC or the CPU do vanish a lot depending on the difficulties, so you could do that, and that'd be a good way to practice.
Oh, like
so
just fighting the actual, like, fighting you computer?
Yeah, you could set the computer to do some things, and you could reflect super dash. You could reflect their staggers and see what they do. Like for example, right there, I couldn't reflect, and it shows you what you could reflect and what you can't. Most of the things in this game that could be reflected are a few things that you could keep count really easily are beams. You cannot reflect those. Let me make sure.
You reflect the vanish afterward.
What do you mean?
You can reflect a beam, but you can't reflect the vanish after a beam because it's true, right?
Yes. So for example, you can reflect that, but if they reflect the beam, oh wait, let me set him up to reflect. And actually, you could get punished real big because of that. So you have to be careful.
So obviously, one of the perks of reflecting is that it sets you up in a better position because your opponent is not on top of you. That is the primary thing. Are there any other benefits to utilizing the mechanic? Is there any other reason to reflect besides as a get off me tool?
There's some characters who got great hitboxes. They could take advantage. If your opponents reflect, they could do certain moves to chase you down. So for example, if I have my opponents attacking and is a recovery move, very strong recovery move, I could punish them with a full screen move, projectile. Some characters has moves that could carry them like Goku Black, and you could punish them for it. Another great way to use the reflect as your advantage is that you are able to reflect again or do moves that has frame 1 invincibility, aka DP. Anything that's frame 1, I like to call them DP, like Dragon Punch. And level 3s, because level 3s also has frame 1 invincibility. So if you opponents reflect, and there's certain strings that keeps them on pressure. So like Cell, OGT Goku, even Jiren, their auto combos keep up on you, so you have to double reflect. You could level 3, and then there's nothing you could do. At high level play, or people that you know is very persistent, this is an example you could do. I wouldn't recommend with level 3 all the time. There's a lot of other DPs, aka Dragon Punch, that has frame 1 invincibility moves, where you could just keep them in check, and you could punish them with frame 1 invincibility. They cannot vanish level 3s, and with some DPs, it's hard for them to react and vanish to it.
And that's particularly useful if you know they're going to keep mashing buttons.
Keep mashing buttons, or you really want them to not keep pressuring on you.
So I just want to point out, you haven't hit reset in a while. You had Broly reflecting a bit, and I can't help but notice that his bar has gone up a little ways. Do you want to talk about the way Reflect affects your meter?
Yes, Reflect is also another great tool in neutral or trying to have meter advantage, because in this game, when your opponents or you reflect, it gives you meter. So for example, a good chunk of meter too. So for example, I'm gonna have Broly reflect some of my Ki Blasts, which is very slow and predictable, and you can see it coming. So this is him not reflecting Ki Blast, and it takes 5, 6 to fill up one little bar. But if you do the same thing with reflecting, look how much more meter he gets from this. He almost filled up one full bar with the same amount of Ki Blast that he wasn't reflecting. So this is very good to have meter advantage and let you use your meter for moves like EX and do amplifying moves to have an advantage.
And this applies to everything, right? No matter what you reflect, you gain meter, correct?
Correct. So if I stagger like we talked about earlier, or any move, you will gain meter for it. So you get meter for blocking, and you get more meter for reflecting. But again, be careful with that, because if you do reflect early, you could get baited. So it's not good. So
be mindful, but a lot of advantage to getting a good reflect in. Let's talk about something we were kind of touching on earlier, which is the way that frames work with reflect. So we touched on the fact that if I were to lariat into vanish, that's not a true string and you could reflect me. But if I were to beam into vanish, that is true and you can't reflect it. But what happens if you reflect the beam portion instead of the vanish portion? Does that have an effect on things?
Yes, it gives you all the times it give you certain frame advantages, and we will give you an example right now. So we have S-Bally doing a simple beam full screen, and you will see on frame advantage in the top left the difference of me blocking the beam, which is 18 frames, and me reflecting the beam, which I have 30 frames of advantage. So that means I have more frames to do things before he is able to take his turn, or he's able to call an assist and keep me more locked down.
That's a big difference too. I mean, 12 whole frames of advantage different is massive in this game.
So when you have an advantage of frames, and when you are reflecting, for example, if I have a character who calls out a full screen projectile like you are enduring, and then call out a beam, you don't want to stay blocking. So when you blocking like this, you have more of a disadvantage. But when you reflect one, you have a greater advantage for you able to come out of the situation not blocking, you know?
Right. So what does that end up looking like in practice when you have that kind of frame advantage? If he were to beam you and vanish, would you be able to react to it now as opposed to before when it was a true string?
So one good thing about reflecting, especially beams, is that you don't give yourself, you won't be in a gel, your opponents won't be having a true string, so they are not able to stay in front of you. And so a lot of the times people like to beam into vanish. If they do that, and you could deflect both things now instead of just one thing, because if you don't deflect the beam into the vanish, you are unable to deflect or reflect the vanish they are coming to you. So now you have to worry about them trying to mix you up.
Okay, and yeah, now you've got an 11 frame advantage over him.
Yes,
versus
and
I think
with
it was -3 the other way if you didn't reflect it, correct?
Yeah, so if he does the same thing, I'm -3, so that means it's his turn. But if I deflect the beam, I able to reset neutral or even try to take my turn back like this. So it's very good to have those type of advantages.
Now let's talk about different places where reflect can be useful, and I think a great place to start is somewhere where people don't really think about it. So obviously super dash is a huge mechanic in this game. It's commonly used, usually to a fault, and people think of the standard counterplay to super dashing as 2H. I know you personally are a fan of actually reflecting super dashes. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, a lot of the time you want to reflect super dash if you're not too comfortable with 2Hing or down heavy. For people who don't know, down heavy is anti-air, which a lot of Dragon Ball players know. But the difference from a reflect and a down heavy, a reflect is for one frame, so you are able to react to things a lot faster like that. And a down heavy anti-air property starts on frame 4. So sometimes you may be a little too slow, and then you will get hit by the super dash, and you don't want to take that risk a lot of the times.
Makes sense. So
right.
Because if you whiff the 2H, you will get hit by the super dash, which
yes,
opens you up
if
to
you
a lot
do
of
the
issues.
2H, if you do the 2H too late or even too early, and the situation just looks a lot scary, you might just want to reflect because you are seeing it and you're not just throwing the reflect out there.
Also seems viable if you play a character with like a worse 2H. I see your team, you have 2 great 2Hs in Jiren and Goku Black, but 17 doesn't have the
17
best 2H in the world.
Yeah, so 17 I do like to reflect, but it's not truly applied to him either because of his Rekka, which is another anti-air mechanic. So see what type of tools your team has and see what they could do. For example, 16, Vegito, they got anti-airs that's also a command grab, so you could take advantage of stuff like that. And S-Bally does too.
I was going to say, so what does it look like when you reflect the super dash? What kind of situation are you in? Are you like in a good position to follow up after that, or should you like go back to playing the neutral game? What's your go-to when something like that happens?
a high level play, a lot of the time people like to super dash and call in assists, but if my opponent reflex that, which they should, so if they reflect the super dash, the assist will still be in front of them, but now they will be pushing off me and the assist. So now they lost an assist, and now it goes set back to neutral, with you getting more meter because you reflected 2 items. So not only that you reflected the super dash and the assist, you also receive in meter by doing that, and now you don't have pressure on you.
Gotcha. Yeah, I need to start putting that into my game plan, man. I mess up 2H's all the time. Need to start reflecting.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to, if you don't feel comfortable, at least you know the option and you could work your way towards it. But the last thing you want is someone to super dash you full screen, call in assist, and now mix you up and get their turn. That's not good. Another good thing with Reflex, and once you understand how Reflex works and how much advantage you do have, you could reflex certain moves and then able to punish them unlike you could before. So before, if you block a vanish, if you block a beam and try to match 2H, you are unable to do anything because that's the true string. But because I reflected, I'm able to do a full punish, and that could change a whole game. You could do a half a health because of something like that. So keep a lookout for that, guys.
That shifts the whole dynamic of your game too, because the second you do that, someone is now less comfortable using their beams in neutral. To me, I think that adds a layer of mind games to it. If you just throw that beam out, I'm gonna reflect it, and you're gonna be in trouble. Alright, so we've talked a lot about using Reflect in your own game, but I think we should touch maybe a little bit on what happens when the shoe's on the other foot. If your opponent is Reflect happy, and they're reflecting you a lot, what's a good way to deal with it? What can you do about people who are reflecting you constantly?
If you have an opponent or a Kid Buu player who likes to reflect a lot, and you want to bait them, and if your character unfortunately doesn't have a key blast to bait them out, a lot of the times you are able to end your strings that makes it look like you are doing the same thing, but you change it up. And so if you want to, for example, do something like this and you see what they're going to do, you can punish them on reaction. So I'm still safe doing this, so they can't punish me, but I could see them reflecting, missing it, and then I could use that time to give up to punish them because they want to be reflect happy and they are not waiting to see what's going to happen.
Right. So it's a baiting game, really, when you're suffering from being reflected constantly. That's kind of what your recommendation would be. Would just bait it out and punish them for it.
Yes. So a lot of people, for example, will try to wake up. They see you coming in, and they're gonna reflect you. They beam, and they coming in. You just don't do nothing, and then from there you can punish them because you know how your opponent is trying to have you back off of them. Especially if someone has good buttons like Bardock or Kid Buu, because they could take huge advantage from a reflect and punish you, unlike most characters.
Oh yeah, I've been reflect Kid Buu 2M'd a bazillion times. It's not fun.
So a lot of people like you will understand. So if you want to bait them, and then once they know, oh, they trying to bait me, they might try to do other things. So learn from that mistakes.